What we're showing here today is a horse that's come to us because he has a habitual habit of stumbling, and it usually starts about 2 weeks after he's been shod, and we see these cases a lot, and the horse has a very slight tendency to be pigeon-toed, and that seems to be kind of a precursor to a lot of horses that start to stumble. And if you notice there, appears to have quite a long foot. He's only been shod for about 7 weeks, but that's basically, he's a big-footed horse. And we're going to look at this as we do a lot of these and see that there's a lot of lateral medial imbalance that creates this problem of periodic stumbling and stuff. Obviously, he's at the end of his shoeing cycle, so you have to take that into consideration. He's not landing too bad. He's actually quite flat, but they say that occasionally he'll land toe first, and on the trail he'll just sometimes even has a tendency to go down. So we're going to see what we can do about adjusting the medial lateral balance to hopefully get him through this, but most importantly to give him a better conformation through his coffin joint and his pastern and all that to overcome some possibilities of some arthritis later on. So as you can see, the tendency is very slight, but nevertheless it still can be accelerated if the balance isn't correct. All right. Typically this is conformation that you see with most pigeon-toed horses, and it seems as though this wall is drifting medially, and the diagonal corner wants to roll under and start to what appears to provide less support underneath of this coronary band on this lateral side. And as we get into this, I'll show you how Mother Nature deals with this problem on her own, and it's because of how we were taught as farriers with a bit of misinformation that creates a stumbling problem, lower limb arthritis, and a variety of other habits that develop just because the horse becoming so uncomfortable in their joint, in this pastern coffin joint and the pastern joint here. So as you can see, a lot of these horses, this one isn't so bad, but a lot of them land on this outside toe, which gives you kind of a hint that maybe this toe is a little bit long. But it appears from this point of view that this toe is actually the tallest. Look at the coronary band. You can see this is a little bit taller than it is there, but I'll show you on the underneath side how this all changes. The picture is totally different on the underneath side, and it's basically a misunderstanding from a farrier's perspective and as well as from a veterinarian's perspective on what we thought was important about these pigeon-toed horses and what really is important for the horses when you get right down to looking at how Mother Nature would manage this problem, manage this condition. It's not a problem until we try to change it into something different. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at this thing very systematically, divide the foot up, look at the sole plane to find out where these indifferences are, and assuredly the horse will feel a benefit of that. All right, I want to draw some lines on this foot. We're going to try just kind of general idea of where the widest part of his foot is, and as you can see, the bars want to terminate approximately an inch back here. So I'm going to draw a line right across here. You can see the arc of that shoe where it's at. For the most part, that's not bad balance from front to back, especially after a 7-week period that the shoes have been on. There was an effort made to increase the length of this by letting the shoe grow over the back. I think that was a plus. So there's some pluses in this application here. It's just that the hoof balance is what is most critical and most important. There's our widest part of our foot. Again, the balance isn't all that bad. The ratios are actually fairly good, just from a rough observation. So the horse really shouldn't have any difficulties with this stumbling thing based on how this foot is divided up around the widest part. So again, I'm going to pull the shoe off. We'll check the foot balance. It's generally where the difference is made, is what goes on inside of that foot from a trimming perspective. So if you look at what we're doing here, looks like this is fairly, it appears as though this is fairly tight to the sole. And if you look at the relationship of where this apex of this frog is and where it fits in this scheme of things, and just look at the distance from the center to the outside and from the center to the inside, this is a perfect example of how Mother Nature takes care of this pigeon-toed condition by how she makes the foot and develops it from birth. And this is the observation that most people miss. It looks from the front as though this lateral side is deficient, meaning that it needs a bit more support. But in reality, the foot is already as wide as it needs to be to accommodate for this type of conformation. The thing is important to know is that this is not a bad conformation. And that's what oftentimes gets interpreted, is that they say, well, he's pigeon-toed and that's not good. But in reality, it's what this horse needs. That's how he's built, is to have that pigeon-toed condition. Just that we oftentimes misunderstand how to deal with it. So we're going to find the live sole here, exfoliate it very specifically. You can see some of the waxy surface coming through here, and almost at this point over here you can see where there's already waxy sole, meaning this is probably fairly close to the live sole, and this is as far as we tend to want to go. Typically we're taught as farriers on horses that are pigeon-toed to lower the medial toe, leave the lateral heel in order to help stabilize this foot to get it to become somewhat straighter. I'm going to move around to the front and I'll show you exactly what you'll see in all of the literature. Okay. All right. Typically we're taught as farriers to, because this foot slopes this direction, that we're taught that if we lower this side, that'll shorten this and cause that flare to reduce. And for the most part it makes sense. At the same time, we're asked to leave this diagonal side higher so that we'll have a tendency to sort of straighten that leg out. Unfortunately, that isn't the way the foot is designed. As I mentioned on the underneath side, this side is already wider than the medial side by the development of the limb. Based on everything that's developed in this horse's body from here up is all designed to accommodate that foot the way it's designed from the bottom. So we think that we in our thinking believe that there was something wrong with this. In reality, it's not. The foot is actually perfect the way it is. Just using the sole as a guide gives us the best information to manage this type of foot. All right, I'm going to exfoliate this to only take away whatever is separating here from this chalky layer. Trim the corners. Okay, you can see where this area here, where the last person that had done this had done exactly what they were instructed to do. They took this inside toe down. You can see it's very, very little that I'm going to have to take off of this corner, and they've left the diagonal heel. You can see how this bar is very, very badly bent. There's a fracture down through the middle of it, and it's starting to become distorted and deformed and roll in. That's typical of the longest part of a hoof wall. It'll go in whichever direction it needs to get eliminated, and in generality, from the widest part of the foot, anytime there's excessive length, the heel will curl in, and then it becomes vulnerable for breakage. So that's typically what's going on here. This bar is bent most. This heel is higher than this one from this live sole. So that's why it's curling and breaking and bending through this region right here. Okay. Okay. In situations like this, it's critical to uncover every aspect of that sole that has a chalky layer so that you can clearly identify the waxy functional part of the sole. So what we're doing is we're getting to that point. Everything around this whole perimeter is now waxy and well identifiable. So to help guide me and to help explain this a little bit more, I'm going to take this marker and I'm going to lay it right in this region, and once you have a marker there, you can see clearly how much higher this wall is than this one here, and how much higher the wall is here than it is directly across from it. There is a little height to this heel, but this one is nearly twice the height. I've drawn a line across the widest part of the foot, and I want to show you where this heel ends and show you how short this caudal aspect of the foot is in comparison to the front portion. See, there's this much distance here and almost 3 times that distance in front. With the shoe that was on there, because he had left it behind, it sort of helped divide that up, which is a good thing. But nevertheless, the true heel is ending much closer to the center of the foot than the toe is actually in its length. So another part of this, I want to show you where this is the line across the back of the heel buttress, or the heel bulbs. And you can see where this one heel ends. This is longer, it's positioned farther back. This heel, because it being taller, is positioned farther forward. So there's a rotational and diagonal imbalance in this foot that's typical of this type of foot. This heel is taller, it's curling, it's breaking, it's fracturing through here, and it's located and it's bearing more weight because of its more forward position. As far as trimming these, we're just going to follow the sole. I'm going to leave my nippers out of the cut to ensure that when I make this cut, I'm going to follow that line just above it, and I'm going to trim this side with respect to how I've prepared it relative to the live sole. And you can see where the heel ended prior to the trim, and now the heel ends back here. So it's in a better functional position and has increased the distance from the widest part of the foot to this caudal region. I know that the tip of the coffin bone is right there. It's approximately an inch forward of that, so my breakover point's going to be there. And if I map this, now that I found the true apex of the frog, the tip of the coffin bone is approximately in this position. Breakover is going to be just slightly forward of that. So now I have 2 segments of the foot that are actually equal in distance. And by the time I rasp this back a little bit more, this is going to increase this length even more to provide a better place to support the back of this horse's foot. I'll just set in above the line and follow this line all the way around. And you can see the curl in the bars. That's exemplary of a distorted heel. The outer wall is pretty straight. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate that distortion by just eliminating the top of it. I want to take a little bit more of this heel away just so that I can get a bigger, broader base of support. And I'm going to clean this little portion out here, which gives me a clearer view of how much I can actually remove from this heel to increase this distance here. I'm going to get my heels prepared first before I work my toe out. Once I get that, then I'll just take the toe down until I start to eliminate that line. I want to leave the line over this region behind the breakover point that I've prepared there. I'm getting real close to having both of the gaps below the rasp relative to the sole the same, and that's my objective. If you remember when we first examined this foot and looked at these different ratios in the bottom of the foot, you can see that this now has got approximately an inch of distance beyond the rasp, and on the lateral side there's just slightly more. This is very typical of all horses that have a slight tendency to be pigeon-toed. Mother Nature builds this into them to give them this lateral support to support this lateral side of the knee. As this heel grows taller, it curled under and lost that support that inherently was there by birth and by development. So, looking at the sole entirely, you can see clearly that trimming this foot to the level of the sole, in cases where this side is drifting this direction, this side is rolling over, the more this wall is trimmed, the wider it gets. The more this wall is trimmed, the closer it gets. So trimming everything to the level of the sole will equalize everything proportionally around the horse's original anatomy. All right, typically I'll always finish taking care of the rest of the flares in the foot before I shape a shoe to it, because obviously this wall tends to drift forward, drift away from this diagonal heel that's virtually just pushing the whole foot that direction. This foot's not as bad as a lot of them, but it's typically what goes on. So I'm going to eliminate all of the flares around the foot before I place a shoe on it. You probably know that horses that have a tendency to be toed out have just an opposite situation. And you deal with them exactly the same way, because the anatomy is such that one side is broader, wider than the other, and it's that way for a reason. It's all to support what's underneath of this knee. If you look at this anatomy now, and I just dropped the foot down on the floor, you can see that simply following those guidelines, the horse's foot normalizes itself and is as straight or straighter than what it was before. So he'll always be slightly pigeon-toed, and best not to change that. I'm going to redraw my lines. Draw this line. You can see where the widest part of that arc is. It always ends right at where the bars intersect into the commissures. It's approximately an inch back from the apex of the frog. Use 3 different ways to evaluate that. Approximately 1 inch ahead of the tip of the frog is where the coffin bone is. Slightly forward of that is where breakover is. Now, got equal distance from the sole to the rasp now, both sides, and looking at it straight down, the distance from the breakover point to the widest part of the foot is slightly wider than this rasp, but it's a great deal wider now to the back. And if you recall, the distance earlier was here to there. This line hasn't changed. Everything around it has changed. The heels have come back, the toe has come back, and we're going to position the shoe so we have a greater proportion of the shoe back here, and this horse will never stumble again because he doesn't have so much to go over the top of. I've got my flares dressed, and I want this wall to be uniform from the outer edge of the sole to the outer edge of the wall. I want that to be as uniform as it can be around the foot. By doing so, it makes the foot quite symmetrical. So I'm going to check this with a shoe. This particular shoe has got a lineup marks to fit right at the widest part of the foot, and it's designed to fit to the back of the frog. So basically, it's pretty much very little adjustment needs to be made to make this any better fit for this particular foot. One of our objectives is to make them comfortable and they exhibit that by standing as straight down and as straight across as they can. They lick their lips a little bit. They're always stretching a little bit. All of those things are critical, and they're important to know where you're at with the horse so that you get the best, as much done as you can to make them comfortable before you put shoes on. If they're still struggling moving feet back and forth, and if they're getting hard to shoe, it's probably because they're uncomfortable. If they become pleasant to shoe, it's usually because they have a good experience. So these are little things that we look at, and the horse is constantly giving us his appreciation for what we're doing here. Seems quite content with all that. These are finished in a fairly traditional way. You want to draw a little mark underneath, fine. Comes to what's over the toe, because there is some distortion there, we're going to just eliminate that with this undercut. Anything that doesn't, we've eliminated all of the at least flare part, so the rest of it is just undercut from underneath. Okay, we've got him done and taken him for a little walk, and it looks like he's landing nicely. He's not real heavy heel first, but he's certainly got a lot of clearance coming forward, and he's landing nice and flat. So as time goes on, he's going to engage his heel just a little bit better. We took a fair amount of heel off of him to get the base of support back, so in reality he's doing very nicely, and I anticipate that he's going to start heel first landing within a short period of time.